The average 18-year-old today, they will spend approximately 15 years of their lives on screen. Is that time aligned with how I choose to live my life? If I was on my last day on Earth, would I look back and feel like I optimized my time in the way that made me the happiest? What do I aspire to be, or who do I aspire to be? How do I intend to change? You have to start with a mantra, carving out an intention for your life. You start with a simple phrase, a simple intention for your life that is big, that is global, and yet that speaks to your values, speaks to who you are, and speaks to who you want to become.
Tyler Rice is the co-founder and CEO of the Digital Wellness Institute and the author of Tactical Disconnection, published globally in May 2025. His work sits at the intersection of behavioral science, workplace well-being, and also digital minimalism. His work offers a pragmatic, evidence-based guide to reducing screen overload and reclaiming focus in a professional and personal life. So what led you to consider digital wellness in this space as something more for your time?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, growing up as a younger millennial, I had the opportunity to experience both a time before technology really fully integrated into my entire day, as well as the time thereafter, the time in which we currently live, where it seems very, very difficult to step away from our tools. And so for me, I was increasingly cognizant of this topic as I grew through adolescence and as I got my first flip phone, and that turned into the iPhone. And then as social media apps became more popular, and I got Snapchat and Instagram, et cetera. And so I saw this current, or a kind of this buildup of usage and usage and usage. And I think it was actually a moment when I was traveling that really awakened my senses to the way in which I think many of my peers were living. And it came from an experience sailing. I was raised in a family that loved to sail, Kenneth. And for anybody that's been out on a boat or been sailing, you may be able to feel the same sense when you are away from land, right? You're out in the middle of the ocean. There is not a cell network that you can find, right? There is not a Wi-Fi signal that you can find. And so at the age of 18, I actually was able to experience a year of my life where I lived on a boat, a small boat with my mom and my dad, and took a gap year. And it was actually that moment where I was disconnected when we were out sailing. I was completely present, completely immersed in the experience, um, that awakened my senses to this notion of tactical disconnection. Because what was beautiful about that, Kenneth, was that when we returned back to port, I was able to use technology and access technology in a way that connected me with my friends and my family back home. So it showed me that there was this double-edged sword, or ultimately a point where you can get the most out of technology without technology getting the most out of you. And that was a really critical experience in my overall digital wellness journey.
That's very interesting, the analogy with your experience with sailing, just as a reminder that this is possible and this is important. And so Tactical Disconnection is the name of your latest book. Can you tell us a little bit what it's about?
Yeah, absolutely. So Tactical Disconnection, it's a book about the ways that we could be happy, healthy, and most productive in a seemingly always on digital world. And so it really applies that same principle that I just spoke to about that experience sailing, where we can learn to maximize all of the benefits of technology while mitigating the affiliated harms through tactical micro breaks and understanding how we can step away in moments of overuse to reclaim that sense of balance, to reclaim that sense of productivity. And so, what's unique about this book, though, Kenneth, is that it takes a positive psychological approach to exploring and explaining the topic of digital overwhelm. So many of the conversations that are held around the space today come from a place of negativity, right? They're looking at screen time and saying, objectively, all screen time is bad, or inherently, this screen time is bad. And what we're really saying is, well, let's actually look at flourishing. Let's apply the construct of human flourishing across our digital usage, and let's understand the ways in which our technology helps us to flourish, and let's maximize that, right? Let's increase that. And ultimately, let's look at those times where our flourishing is being challenged by our technology usage. And let's learn to mitigate that. And so tactical disconnection refers to strategies when we are finding ourselves in what's called the zone of overuse. We're overstimulated. Our time on screen is not intentional. And it's ways to bring intention to our attention so that we can proceed with clarity and ultimately make sure that we are using our time as we intend to do it.
How do we know when we're in that zone?
Introspection. So I get asked this question a lot, and to this day, there's no scientific evidence that shows X amount of screen time is good versus X amount is bad. It really comes down to self awareness and being able to understand and assess your own feelings in terms of your screen usage. Is this benefiting me, right? Is it helping me? Is it aligned with my intentions and my goals? And am I spending my time in accordance with those values? Or is this time unintentional? And do I feel a negative feeling after spending so many hours on screen, right? And so that's the challenge in this and the opportunity. But it really comes from building that introspective muscle and increasing in awareness.
Is there a process? Is there a method? Is there reading materials that you would recommend? How do we start?
Yeah, great question. So the way that I've outlined it in the book is it is centered around three core pillars, and those are perception, intention, and action. So the first step is to awaken our perception, right? To awaken our senses to those around us and understand how we perceive others when they are on their devices. So I use an example of, imagine you're in a meeting, right? And somebody is sitting in a meeting with you, Kenneth, and you are on your device in the midst of this one-on-one or in the midst of this meeting, right? For you to put yourself into the shoes of that employee or that person on the train who's using their device and ask yourself, what are your perceptions of them in that moment, right? Are they somebody that you feel is present? Are they somebody that you feel is attentive? How does that make you feel, right? And then it's important for us to flip the script around and actually to awaken our senses to the moments in which we are exhibiting that exact same behavior and making others feel those same feelings or perceptions, have those same perceptions of us. So that is perception. Perception turns into intention. So it's okay, given that, how do I intend to change, right? Maybe as a leader, Kenneth, right? What do I aspire to be, or who do I aspire to be? Or what feelings do I aspire to create in others when I am in their presence, right? And then action, right? How can I take action that reinforces that behavior so that ultimately I am using my time in accordance with my intention?
Talking about intention. So, what do I aspire to be? What kind
Yes.
of person do I aspire to be? How do you build that intention?
I think you have to start by I talk about this. You have to start with a mantra. Okay. You have to start with carving out an intention for your life as if you were writing a quote in your high school yearbook. You start with a simple phrase, a simple intention for your life that is big, that is global, and yet that speaks to your values, speaks to who you are, and speaks to who you want to become, right? And it's with that that we can actually begin to then measure up our time and assess the way that we are using or not using our time in accordance with or in support of that mantra or in support of that value. So seize the day, right? Carpe diem. Am I seizing the day when I spend 3 hours on TikTok? Maybe, maybe not, right? So that's for me, it's a framework from which I can actually analyze my time and my screen time in particular, to see if I can reallocate some of that time to be more in support of my goals or my intentions.
So, we've talked about perception, intention, and then let's talk a little bit about action.
Yeah, this is the fun part. For any intention to be successful, we need to take action. And for any action to be successful, we need to introduce both physical and digital nudges into our environment. So when it comes to digital wellness, we need both physical and digital barriers or nudges to make that intended usage easy and that unintended usage hard. And that's referred to a sludge. So it's a nudge versus a sludge. And what we can do, Kenneth, is we can take actions to build environments around us that support our intended usage. So, for instance, Opal. Opal is a great example of an app that we can use and a digital intervention that we can use to make the intended usage easy and the unintended usage hard. Physical nudges, right? Things that we can introduce into our physical environment to reduce distraction. Things as simple as carving out a dedicated tech-free space, removing your phones from your bedroom at night, making your home office environment one that is clean, orderly, and removed from unwanted or unnecessary digital stimuli. Creating policies internally within a family, within a nuclear family to say, hey, at dinner time, this is going to be a phone-free zone. So we're looking again at both the physical and the digital interventions that we can apply in order to make that intended action easy and that unintended action hard.
One thing that's really, I think, interesting is it seems like people tend to overestimate their willpower and underestimate the importance of their environments and their habits. And yet, science shows that it's very clearly the environment, it's very clearly the rules you set up around your life that will guide a lot of the outcome. What do you tell people to make them realize that?
It's not so much what you tell people. I think it's what you show people. And I think what you show people is the aggregate amount of time that they will spend over the course of their lives spending time on screen. And so for the average 18-year-old today, they will spend approximately 15 years of their lives on screen. Is that time aligned with how I choose to live my life, how I wish to live my life? If I was on my last day on earth, would I look back and feel like I optimized my time in the way that made me the happiest and those around me the happiest, the healthiest, the most productive? And so it's really about showing people that. And then I think, Kenneth, it's about showing people the power of incremental changes, just a 1% change over the course of each day. It only takes a small fraction of a change over the course of 50, 60, 100 days, 365 days to lead to drastic outcomes when applied over the course of 6 years or 12 years or a lifetime.
Yeah.
And so I think it's about showing.
Can you talk for the audience a little bit about success stories? Have you seen this work? Are there examples of this that you might be able to talk about?
Absolutely. So the success stories that I study are specifically in the context of the workplace, and that's where my approach is really focused. Because just to as background, the way in which we use technology at work and outside of working hours impacts the way in which we use technology personally. So if I'm stressed because I have to work 12 hours a day online, and we know that that's probably not optimal productivity. That's a lot of, responding to messages and being on meetings, etc. Well, frankly, I'm more likely to seek solace and seek dopamine through personal scrolling, right? And when those two become intermingled and intertwined, it creates this unvirtuous cycle of screen time where screen time for work creates screen time personal, and personal screen time leads to increased time because I wasn't efficient at work. And so that is the context through which I approach this question. And the success stories are actually very, very salient. So we've done a lot of workshops with teams, and by just bringing attention to the time that we're spending at work on screen and starting to create healthier digital boundaries, we've been able to decrease workplace burnout by a factor of 22%, increase productivity by an average of 12%, and ultimately decrease workplace anxiety and behavioral health outcomes by negative behavioral health outcomes by 15%. So that's the impact that digital wellness is having in the workplace, and that also ultimately speaks to the impact that it's having in their personal lives as well.
These results are very striking. Also, congratulations on having. Is this mostly training and then follow-ups that you do with groups of people? Are there kind of tools that you use, or products or apps or software? How do you implement this in the workplace?
Yeah, so we are the Digital Wellness Institute. We're a training and software organization. So we have both sides of that equation. First and foremost, it's a training organization. So we go into companies, we speak to them about the topic of digital wellness. We establish a baseline measurement of the organization's level of digital balance, and then ultimately through a series of interventions, courses, trainings, etc., workshops, we then measure the efficacy of that intervention, and that's where we establish kind of the pre and the post. For more longitudinal and longer impact programs, we also have a software that we've white labeled and created in partnership with a great company based in Canada called Produce 8. And that's a digital workplace analytics software that we provide to clients that actually measures the level of digital overwhelm within the workplace. And it quantifies the amount of time that employees are spending on screen each and every day on things like Zoom, responding to things like Slack messages, responding to emails. And it actually empowers employees with the data to have conversations with their management about working hours and the need to potentially carve out more time during the working day to do deep, focused work so that they're not required to do that work after hours simply because there was this culture of over communication that took them away from their moments of focus.
I saw recently that Microsoft, I think, published an article about, I think, what they call the rise of the triple peak day. And what they're looking at is they're saying, the 9 to 5 is dead. Like people don't really work only 9 to 5 anymore. Um, but they're working, kind of all hours. And that has real consequences. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about this. Obviously, Microsoft taking a position in that field is a massive validation for the work that you're doing. But I'm curious how you interpret that.
No, it is. It is. And the data at scale that they have is amazing, right? So yes, Microsoft in June, I believe, they published a study that showed that the boundaries between office hours or traditional office hours and everything else outside of those hours and work is thinner than it's ever been. So the average Teams user, they found, sent 42% more chats after hours in just the past year and a half alone than they did in years prior. So we're seeing an increase in not only time spent after hours, which I'll come back to, but ultimately the amount of communications that are being sent. So this culture of kind of over communication that is really, again, impeding on our ability to do focused, deep work. But they also found that because of that inability to do focused, deep work during those traditional working hours, 30% of employees actually had an evening spike in work around the hours of 10 p.m. because that was the time in which they weren't being bombarded by messages. So we're seeing this culture of over communication that is ultimately leading to less efficiency during the workday and ultimately the need to spend more time on screen after hours simply because that is the only time to have solace and potentially focused hours at work.
So how do you respond to that? What kind of changes could be put in place, if that's the case in your team or your organization?
So one of the things that we focus on is the importance of setting a communication charter within a small nuclear team. So imagine that you work most closely with a team of 5 to 7 individuals. Setting a communication charter means establishing norms around communication both during working hours and after hours. What we can do is we can actually create a matrix or just a spreadsheet where we see, okay, well, Kenneth is most productive between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m., right? Tyler might be most creative and most productive between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. after lunch, right? So given that, how can we use simple functions like schedule send to align our messaging with times in which people prefer to receive that messaging, right? And vice versa. And then what's really important about that too, Kenneth, is we can actually work out as a team what communications rise to the level of necessity and requiring urgent attention versus messaging that maybe doesn't need a response within the next 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 2 hours, right? And when we do that, we're actually increasing productivity as a team. We're increasing satisfaction. It's amazing. I've seen this firsthand. It's amazing to see new employees who come into an organization and who are asked those questions, right? When do you prefer to do focused work, right? What are your boundaries around work and life away from work? It's amazing to see their responses and their faces light up because they actually feel like their team is caring about them and willing to listen to them and what they need to be successful at work.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the thing that everybody's talking about in terms of technology, which is, artificial intelligence and how this is changing the game. What kind of impact has it had on your visual well-being?
To answer that question, I want to maybe use an analogy. Okay. So bear with me on this one. Let me use a sailing analogy. Okay. So for me personally, I derive a lot of immense pleasure and focus and enjoyment from being in a creative state of flow. I love being creative. I love making music. I love writing, right? I love creating things. What I found is that's kind of akin to my love of sailing, right? So when I'm sailing, I'm enjoying the moment. I'm tweaking the sails. I'm being fully present, right? AI and the use of AI for me helps sustain my optimal usage and helps improve my enjoyment and my ability to be in a deep state of flow when it tackles those monotonous things in my way that impede on my ability to be in flow. And if I could extend the analogy again, once again to sailing, it's as if there are sea mines that are coming up, right? And AI is almost like a drone that's attacking those mines and keeping me able to be focused right on the task at hand. Where I believe, begins to teeter into a point of negative usage for me personally is when it starts to take over those creative moments, when it starts to supplant my ability to write or my ability to create or my ability to make music, right? It almost is taking away that enjoyment from me as if it were taking away sailing of the boat to such an extent where I don't have anything to do at that point other than just sit back, relax, and my time is spent idly, right? So yes, I absolutely use AI, but I use it intentionally to take away some of those monotonous and less than exciting parts of my job, so that I can focus on the things that bring me a lot of joy.
I want to talk about, like, you're an expert of workplace digital well-being. You've written this great book about tactical disconnection. Let's talk first about products that are currently used in the day-to-day of people in the workplace. So, Slack, Teams. Are there changes that you would like to see in these products to support digital wellness?
Yeah, where to begin? Where to begin? Slack is a fascinating one, and Teams in general. Intro workplace communication tools like Slack and Teams, I would love to see greater features and functionality that allows for people to set their own boundaries as to when they wish to receive messages. So again, let's just use that example of peak flow, right? So let's assume after lunch, 1 to 3, I'm in peak flow, and especially if you're a technical developer, right? You really need to carve out hours of work. So I would love to see features that disable communications to come in and impede on my focus and impair that state of flow, and variable times that I can set up during the course of the day. That would be one element. Another thing that I would love to see, Kenneth, is, yeah, frankly, I would love to see more AI functionality inbuilt within Slack and Teams to tackle, again, some of those minds that take away on my attention, right? And if I can respond to a Slack message in 30 seconds rather than 3 minutes, yeah, that would be amazing. Um,
So,
yeah,
yeah, come back to the, I love this idea of like peak flow. Maybe you can put in, in Slack and say, or Teams and say, hey, this is when I'm most productive. Like, this is my peak flow. So during those times, people can't send me messages. Or what does the, what does the reply message look like to someone who's trying to contact you at 4 p.m. and this is your peak flow time?
excellent question. So what I would envision would be a response that's an automated response that says, hey, Kenneth, this is the time that I've set up for deep work, deep flow. Is this message urgent? And does this require my attention to break the state of flow? Right? If yes, send it and it will come through. Right? If no, it will arrive after my period of deep flow finishes.
Very simple. All right, we'll get in touch with Slack and Microsoft after this, and make those changes. That's great. So let's talk a little bit about, something that I'm even more interested in, which is Opal. And I think you know a little bit about what we do. So, and I think, most people here as well, listening to this interview, if you could change something in Opal, what would you change to better align with what you understand about visual well-being?
Mhm, mhm, mhm. First, I have to say I'm a huge admirer of what you all have built. It's by far and away one of the most beautifully developed and created utility apps for this purpose. It's really commendable. So
Really
congratulations
appreciate it. Thank you very
on
much. That's the team will be thrilled. We love these. We love this kind of feedback.
good. I'm glad to hear.
Thank you.
And to your question, I love when a user is onboarded into the app. It does show, right, the projected amount of time that they're likely to spend on screen. Um, Back to the conversation earlier, potential opportunity for integration would be allowing people to enter that prompt, right? Allowing people to reflect upon, does this time align with your intention? And more importantly, maybe what is that intention, right? What is your mantra? And then, Kenneth, at various times through the product lifecycle, or when people are actually using the product, um, when they choose to unlock an app and take a break from it that they had previously logged, reintroducing that prompt, reintroducing that mantra and saying, are you sure, right? Is this, it's almost a speed bump, right? Is this truly aligned with your intention, right? And it's just a simple little speed bump, but again, it kind of introduces one more point of reflection. That's on the digital side. Um, I would love, and I think this would be a very, very cool thing for you all to enter. I would love if Opal would create a physical product as well, similar to what Brick is doing, right? Where now I can actually create intentional spaces. So, for instance, instead of my blocking of apps being time bound, right? Instead of me setting certain times throughout the day in which I am restricted from those applications, creating it so it's location bound, such that when I enter my bedroom or when I enter my workplace, my office, right? Those apps are automatically restricted, right? And so it's again introducing kind of the combination of the physical and the digital interventions. And I would just be fascinated. I would be fascinated about that.
Super interesting. Well, we'll have to get back in touch with you about these things. This is some of these are what we're actually working on, so that's very exciting. And I particularly like how you're talking about intention. I find that it's I guess it's hard to get people to formulate intention, to get most people to formulate intention. They don't really know where to start. They don't really know. I guess people want to jump into action usually, and like, I'm fed up with this. Give me an easy kind of quick fix. And so I wonder like how you go about this and how you think we could approach motivating enough people to set an intention.
I think it starts with cultural norms. Okay, and those cultural norms can be introduced as early as elementary and junior high and high school. Can be introduced at the university or collegiate level, or it can be introduced at the workplace level. But there needs to be a reshifting or a reprioritization of norms and introducing digital wellness as a core aspect of well-being overall, right? There are a lot of public service groups that bring attention to the harms of smoking, for instance, that bring attention to the harms of eating poorly, right? And a lot of that shows up in our curricula in health and wellness class as students or as university students, and ultimately our employee well-being programs. But there needs to be a shift in the ways in which we are introducing this topic, and it needs to be more prevalent at a younger age and throughout a person's life so that they are not left to feel like they need to find this on their own, that they need to seek a solution on their own, right? It needs to be something that is just, there's so much more support around and there's so much more data and conversations around, frankly.
So it's going to take a few years, but we definitely want to go in that direction for sure. Thank you very much, Tyler. Really appreciate it. And talk to you soon.
Pleasure. Thank you so much, Kenneth.